She was the ultimate symbol of female empowerment on television and a real-world superhero who captivated millions with a single spin. Today we are going to talk about the untold story of Lynda Carter. But behind the iconic golden lasso and the dazzling smile was a complex journey filled with sudden fame, heartbreaking isolation, devastating personal battles, and a quiet resilience that outmatched any villain she ever fought on screen. You might think you know the woman who defined an entire era of pop culture, but her reality was far more dramatic than any comic book plot. The journey to becoming a global icon did not begin in a glamorous Hollywood studio, but rather in the scorching heat of the American Southwest, where a young girl was silently struggling to find her place. Lynda Jean Cordova Carter was born on July 24, 1951, in Phoenix, Arizona, into a household that blended two very different cultural worlds. Her father, Colby Carter, was an antique dealer of English and Scots-Irish descent, while her mother, Juana Cordova, was of Mexican heritage with deep roots tracing back to Chihuahua. Growing up in a multicultural household gave Lynda a unique perspective on the world, but it also brought significant social challenges. In the conservative landscape of Arizona during the 1950s and 1960s, being of mixed heritage meant navigating a complex environment where she often felt misunderstood. Furthermore, a deep emotional fracture occurred when Lynda was just 10 years old, as her parents went through a painful divorce. Her mother was suddenly left to raise the children on a meager income, working tirelessly at a Motorola factory to keep food on the table. The financial strain was immense, and the resulting stress cast a long shadow over her childhood. During these formative years, Lynda also battled intense insecurities about her physical appearance. She was remarkably tall for her age, eventually reaching 5 feet 9 inches, which made her tower over her classmates and feel painfully awkward. She constantly felt like she did not quite fit the standard mold of delicate beauty promoted by the magazines of the era. She was often teased for her height and her perceived clumsiness, retreating into her own world to escape the harsh judgments of her peers. Yet, beneath that shy and gangly exterior was a burning desire to perform and a powerful vocal talent that demanded to be heard. What exactly caused this awkward, self-conscious teenager to transform into a fearless stage powerhouse? Music became her ultimate sanctuary and her first true artistic love. Long before she ever considered reading a script or stepping onto a television set, Lynda found profound emotional release in singing. By the time she reached her mid-teens, she was already studying musical performance intensely, locking herself in her room to practice scales and mimic the great vocalists of the time. She eventually gathered the courage to join a local Phoenix band called Just Us, playing small gigs at pizza parlors and neighborhood venues. Her talent was undeniable, and soon she transitioned to a more professional group called The Relatives. Interestingly, this band featured a young and ambitious drummer named Gary Berghoff, who would later find massive international fame playing the character Radar on the legendary television show MASH. Together, they spent hours rehearsing, dreaming of a future far away from the desert. Lynda was exceptionally ambitious and driven, making life-changing decisions at an age when most teenagers were merely worrying about passing their high school exams. She was bright enough to earn excellent grades, ultimately qualifying for an academic scholarship at Arizona State University. But the traditional, safe educational path did not appeal to her restless spirit. In a move that completely shocked her family, the soon-to-be superstar decided to reject her university studies to experience the fast-paced, unpredictable road of a touring musician. Even though her parents were vehemently against this decision, Lynda packed her bags and began touring across the United States. She spent grueling months performing in smoky lounges, crowded hotel casinos, and dimly lit clubs, primarily across Nevada in cities like Reno and Las Vegas. She was only 16 years old when she made this bold leap into the perilous entertainment industry. You can easily imagine the immense tension and worry back at her home in Arizona. Years later, she recalled how her father was entirely baffled by the entire situation. He drove over to Lynda's mother's house and demanded to know why on earth she would let their young, vulnerable daughter go on a cross-country tour to perform alongside older strangers and seasoned musicians. Her mother, deeply understanding her daughter's iron will and stubborn determination, simply replied that if Lynda wanted to do something, she could never be talked out of it. And so Lynda spent her late teenage years learning the brutal realities of the entertainment business firsthand. She sang night after night, dealing with difficult, intoxicated crowds, enduring long bus rides between obscure towns, and surviving the exhausting grind of the touring circuit. She performed up to 3 shows a night, pushing her vocal cords to their absolute limit while learning how to command a stage and capture an audience's attention. But after a few years of this relentless schedule, a quiet, unsettling realization began to creep into her mind. The road was draining her spirit, and the dream of becoming a chart-topping touring vocalist was starting to lose its magnificent shine. She realized this grueling routine was not what she wanted for her ultimate future. She needed a drastic new direction, but what could a burned-out lounge singer possibly do next? She decided to return home to Arizona and pivot her focus toward modeling in the competitive world of beauty pageants. With her striking features, poise, and tall stature, she was a natural fit for the pageant circuit of the early 1970s. She quickly found massive success, winning the prestigious title of Miss Arizona, which propelled her to the national stage. In 1972, her life took a glamorous turn when she was crowned Miss World USA. This victory earned her a highly coveted ticket to London to compete in the International Miss World pageant, where she successfully reached the semifinals. On paper, it was a massive, undisputed triumph. She was receiving national press coverage, wearing glittering crowns and signing autographs for adoring fans. She even had the immense honor of traveling alongside legendary entertainer Bob Hope on his famous USO tours, performing for military troops stationed overseas. But internally, Lynda was completely miserable. The pageant circuit felt incredibly hollow and superficial. The fierce competitiveness, the constant judgment based solely on measurements, and the relentless female objectification deeply conflicted with her personal values. She felt like a beautiful mannequin on display rather than a respected, talented artist. Once again, she found herself successful but profoundly unfulfilled. She knew she had to leave the pageant world behind forever, but she still craved a meaningful creative outlet. Armed with a little money saved from her modeling gigs and a fierce, unwavering determination, she packed her belongings into her car and drove west to Los Angeles. Hollywood was the ultimate testing ground, and Lynda was ready to give acting a serious try. But Hollywood in the mid-1970s was certainly not waiting with open arms for a former beauty queen with absolutely no formal acting credits. The rejection she faced was immediate, constant, and incredibly harsh. She spent months going to rigorous acting classes, studying her craft diligently, and driving across the city to countless auditions, only to be turned away time and time again. Casting directors and producers saw her merely as a beautiful face and blatantly refused to take her seriously as a dramatic performer. She managed to land a few minor, forgettable guest spots on shows like Starsky and Hutch, but the paychecks were painfully small and infrequent. Her hard-earned savings began to evaporate rapidly in the expensive Los Angeles economy. By 1975, Lynda was entirely broke. She was down to the last $25 in her bank account, surviving on cheap meals and seriously contemplating packing up her car to drive back to Arizona in absolute defeat. The endless cycle of rejection had severely damaged her confidence. Her grand Hollywood dream was seemingly over, and she was preparing to surrender. But fate has a funny way of stepping in at the exact moment you are ready to give up entirely. Just as she was preparing to leave Los Angeles for good, her agent called with one final urgent audition. The television network was casting a new, highly anticipated series based on a famous comic book character, and they were desperately struggling to find the right leading lady. They needed someone who possessed formidable physical strength, undeniable grace, and a deep sense of moral authority. Lynda walked into the audition room, channeled all her remaining energy, and completely mesmerized the skeptical producers. Against all overwhelming odds, she won the role of a lifetime. The character, of course, was Wonder Woman. This monumental opportunity would instantly catapult her from a struggling, impoverished actress to a globally recognized superstar. But creating a television legend was far from an easy task. The production of the show was incredibly demanding, and Lynda threw herself into the iconic role with total, unrelenting dedication. She did not just want to wear the flashy costume, she desperately wanted to embody the character's empowering spirit. In fact, the iconic spinning transformation that became the absolute trademark of the show was actually Lynda's brilliant personal idea. The producers were trying to figure out a dynamic, visually appealing way for the character to change into her superhero costume without relying on expensive, time-consuming special effects. Lynda, drawing from her extensive dance background, suggested a graceful, fast-paced pirouette. That simple, elegant spin became absolute television history, but the physical demands of the action-packed show were intense and often dangerous. In those days, safety regulations on television sets were not nearly as strict as they are today. Lynda bravely performed many of her own risky stunts, including a terrifying sequence where she was hanging from a flying helicopter high above the ground. She was utterly fearless, determined to make the action look as authentic and thrilling as possible. The network executives constantly pushed back, worrying that a female-led action show would fail to attract male audiences. But Lynda proved them entirely wrong. The show became a massive commercial hit, first airing on ABC and later transitioning to CBS for its remaining seasons. Lynda Carter became a cherished household name, a profound inspiration for young girls everywhere, and a powerful symbol of strength across the globe. Posters of her heroic character adorned bedroom walls everywhere, and she was suddenly the most in-demand actress of the entire decade. The famous feminist leader Gloria Steinem even chose Lynda's character to grace the cover of the inaugural issue of Miss Magazine, solidifying her status as a cultural icon. If you are enjoying this story, subscribe to the channel. We cover stories like this every week. While her professional career was soaring to unimaginable, record-breaking heights, her personal circumstances were silently crumbling behind the scenes. During the highly successful run of the show, Lynda met a powerful manager and influential producer named Ron Samuels. He was a dominant figure in Hollywood, representing major stars and negotiating massive deals. They began a passionate romantic relationship and eventually married in 1977. To the outside world and the glossy tabloid magazines, they were the ultimate Hollywood power couple. They attended glamorous premieres, walked countless red carpets, and seemed to have a perfect partnership. But behind the heavy closed doors of their luxurious estate, the reality was entirely different and deeply troubling. Lynda would later refer to this marriage as one of the most difficult and unfortunate chapters of her existence. The dynamic was heavily strained right from the very beginning. Samuels was deeply involved in managing every single aspect of her career, which dangerously blurred the lines between loving husband and controlling business partner. He pushed her into specific television projects and endorsements, prioritizing financial gain over her artistic desires. The environment eventually became suffocating. Massive, explosive arguments echoed through their home constantly. The emotional distance between them grew so vast that relentless rumors began spreading around the Hollywood elite that the couple did not even sleep in the same room anymore. Lynda was arguably the biggest female star on television, yet she felt profoundly isolated, trapped and lonely in her own home. The immense pressure of maintaining a perfect, smiling public image while navigating a highly toxic marriage took a heavy, invisible toll on her spirit. After years of profound unhappiness and silent suffering, she finally found the immense courage to file for divorce in 1982. The legal separation was highly publicized and emotionally draining, but she was finally free from his control. However, she was left emotionally exhausted and deeply wary of trusting anyone in the entertainment industry. She needed a massive fresh start and a genuine reason to believe in true connection again. That fresh start arrived in the most unexpected, unglamorous place imaginable. Shortly after her painful divorce, she reluctantly attended a corporate executive event for Maybelline Cosmetics. Lynda had recently signed a highly lucrative multi-year contract to be the primary face of the beauty brand, a successful partnership that would ultimately last for over a decade. At this formal corporate dinner, she was introduced to a highly successful Washington attorney named Robert Altman. Initially, Lynda was not interested in the slightest. She had spent years surrounded by flashy, smooth-talking Hollywood types, and naturally assumed that a corporate lawyer from the East Coast would be entirely boring and rigid. She could not have been more wrong. Robert was incredibly charming, deeply intelligent, and most importantly, completely unimpressed by her massive celebrity status. He treated her like a normal human being. He saw Lynda, the complex person, not the famous superhero on the posters. They spent the entire evening talking deeply about politics, literature, and life outside of the entertainment bubble. A profound, unbreakable bond began to form almost instantly. This chance meeting ignited a passionate, enduring romantic relationship. Robert brought much-needed stability, genuine respect, and intellectual stimulation into her chaotic world. But there was a massive geographical problem that threatened to tear them apart. Lynda resided in Los Angeles, the absolute epicenter of the entertainment industry and the base of her career. While Robert was firmly anchored to his prestigious law firm in Washington, D.C., a long-distance relationship was proving far too difficult to maintain, and a massive, life-altering decision had to be made. In a bold move that completely stunned her agents, managers, and the Hollywood press, Lynda decided to pack up her entire life and move to the East Coast in 1984. She bravely chose love over the immediate convenience of her booming career. But leaving Los Angeles did not mean she stopped working entirely. Her star power was still immense, and the network still wanted her. She frequently flew back and forth across the country to film highly rated television specials, star in made-for-TV movies, and continue her extensive promotional work for various brands. Yet the shiny Hollywood magic was rapidly fading for her. She found that many of the feature film roles she was offered lacked real depth or substance. The superficial nature of the industry no longer appealed to a woman who was desperately craving deep, meaningful roots. She wanted something far more permanent than a temporary movie set. In 1987, Lynda and Robert purchased land and built a magnificent 18,000-square-foot custom home in Potomac, Maryland, located just a few miles outside the intense political bustle of Washington. They were finally ready to settle down, escape the relentless paparazzi, and build the family she had always dreamed of. They joyfully welcomed their son James in 1988, followed by their daughter Jessica in 1990. Stepping completely away from the glaring spotlight, Lynda found profound, unexpected satisfaction in becoming a completely dedicated, full-time mother. She happily traded glamorous red carpets for early morning school runs and late-night script readings for bedtime stories with her toddlers. She famously stated in interviews that true happiness only comes from having the right people in your environment to spend your precious time with. She raised her children with a strict focus on intellectual pursuits, emphasizing personal accomplishments, education, and moral values over expensive material presents. She was fiercely determined to give them a grounded, normal upbringing, far away from the distorted, often damaging reality of celebrity culture. She wanted them to know the value of hard work and integrity. But just as her family life seemed perfectly serene and secure, a massive, unprecedented storm was brewing on the horizon that would test her resilience in ways she never imagined. In 1992, her husband Robert Altman became heavily entangled in a massive international legal controversy known as the BCCI banking scandal. The Bank of Credit and Commerce International was facing global fraud allegations, and Robert, alongside legendary political figure Clark Clifford, was indicted on severe federal charges. Suddenly, the quiet, private family life they had carefully built in Maryland was violently thrust into the center of a brutal, relentless media circus. Dozens of aggressive reporters and camera crews camped permanently outside their driveway. The political and legal pressure was unimaginable, threatening to destroy Robert's career and send him to federal prison. For a woman who had spent years carefully crafting a pristine, heroic public image, this was an absolute waking nightmare. Many Hollywood friends advised her to distance herself from the scandal to protect her brand, but Lynda absolutely refused to hide. She proved to the entire world that her superhero persona was not just a scripted act. Every single day of the grueling 5-month federal trial, Lynda sat proudly in the front row of the crowded courtroom. She held her head high, sketched drawings of the proceedings to stay focused, and offered unwavering, fierce support to her husband. She passionately defended his character to the skeptical press, refusing to let the media destroy her family's reputation. Ultimately, after months of agonizing testimony and intense legal battles, Robert was completely acquitted of all charges. The jury fully cleared his name, and the family wept in the courtroom. But the immense stress of the terrifying ordeal had left deep, invisible scars on Lynda's spirit. The relentless anxiety of the trial, combined with the lingering, unresolved pressures of her past massive fame, triggered a deeply personal, hidden crisis. Behind the strong, unshakable facade she showed the world and the cameras, Lynda had been quietly battling a severe addiction to alcohol. It was a dangerous coping mechanism that had slowly spiraled out of control over the stressful years. She hid it remarkably well from the public and even from some friends, but the devastating secret was silently destroying her from the inside out. In the late 1990s, realizing with terrifying clarity that she was risking her health, her marriage, and her children, Lynda made the absolute bravest decision of her entire journey. She confronted her illness directly, asked her husband for support, and entered a private rehabilitation facility. The recovery process was deeply painful, forcing her to unpack decades of suppressed trauma, but she emerged utterly victorious. She completely transformed her lifestyle and has proudly maintained her sobriety for decades. Instead of hiding her past struggles in shame, she eventually chose to speak openly and passionately about her recovery. She used her massive public platform to inspire others fighting similar silent battles, proving that true strength lies in acknowledging your deepest vulnerabilities and aggressively seeking help. With her family secure and her physical and mental health fully restored, Lynda slowly began to welcome the spotlight back into her world. but this time strictly on her own unyielding terms. As her children grew older, attended prestigious universities, and pursued their own successful legal careers, Lynda felt the familiar, undeniable pull of the stage. She decided to return to her very first artistic love, music. She formed a spectacular jazz and blues band, collaborating with world-class musicians, and began performing in prestigious venues across the country, including the legendary Kennedy Center in Washington. She released highly acclaimed studio albums, proving to the critics that her vocal talent had only grown richer, deeper, and more emotive with time. Her creative renaissance was well underway, but it certainly did not stop at music. She completely embraced new, innovative mediums, surprisingly finding a massive, highly dedicated new audience in the booming video game industry. Because her husband Robert was the highly successful CEO of ZeniMax Media, the parent company of Bethesda Softworks, Lynda became heavily involved in creating original music and providing distinct voice acting for wildly popular gaming franchises. She voiced multiple pivotal characters in the Elder Scrolls series and even wrote and performed original jazz songs for the post-apocalyptic world of Fallout 4. She introduced her commanding voice to a completely new generation of millions of fans who had never even seen a single episode of her original television show. Hollywood also came calling once again, and Lynda answered with strategic, memorable guest appearances. She graced the screen in hit television shows like Law and Order and the hit comedy 2.5 Men. In a beautiful, poetic nod to her historic comic book legacy, she appeared in Smallville. Later, she took on a powerful recurring role in the series Supergirl, where she masterfully portrayed the President of the United States. She also delighted millions of fans with an emotional cameo appearance in the blockbuster film Wonder Woman 1984. She was no longer the struggling, impoverished actress desperately looking for a break. She was certified Hollywood royalty, commanding immense respect and admiration whenever she walked onto a set. In 2018, her monumental, decades-long contributions to the entertainment industry were permanently cemented when she finally received a coveted star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. Surrounded by her loving family, close friends, and hundreds of adoring, emotional fans, she stood proudly over that brass star. It was a beautiful testament to a remarkable career built on raw talent, relentless perseverance, and unbreakable grace. But life inevitably demands a balance of magnificent triumph and profound tragedy. In 2021, Lynda faced the most devastating, heartbreaking loss of her journey when her beloved husband Robert passed away after a brave, difficult battle with a rare blood cancer known as myelofibrosis. They had been happily married for nearly 40 years, sharing a unique bond that survived the intense pressures of fame, brutal legal battles, and the profound challenges of personal recovery. His tragic passing left a massive, echoing void in her world. Yet, even in her profound, crippling grief, Lynda remained a steadfast pillar of strength for her children. She channeled her immense sorrow into passionate advocacy, using her voice to raise significant awareness and critical funding for the medical research desperately needed to combat the terrible disease that took her husband. Today, Lynda Carter stands firmly as a towering, magnificent figure of human resilience. She is not just a symbol of vintage television nostalgia. She is a powerful woman who navigated the treacherous, unforgiving waters of global fame, overcame brutal personal demons, fiercely protected her family against all odds, and constantly reinvented herself as a multifaceted artist. She proved definitively that true power does not come from a magical television prop. It comes from the courage to face your darkest moments and the sheer strength to keep moving forward, no matter what the world throws at you. Her journey is an absolute masterclass in survival, dignity, and grace. Which decision in Lynda's journey do you think defined her true character the most? Leaving Hollywood for love or standing boldly by her husband during a federal trial? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Subscribe to the channel. We will see you in the next one.